Welcome to Beyond the IT Headlines. I'm your host, Shawn Rosemarin. With video generation going from scarce and expensive to abundant and free, the first systems to break aren't going to be your creative workflows. Infrastructure, governance, forensic systems, that's not a content problem. It's a crisis. But more specifically, we're going to all struggle with what is actually true. Is what I'm seeing actually happening? Did it happen? Or is it all fabricated? Today, folks, we're diving into OpenAI's release of Sora 2, an AI video generator that turns text prompts into hyper-realistic videos, changing our diet of social media and becoming more and more compelling than ever. It's already making waves in content creation, but we're going to talk about today what it means for businesses, creators, and even society at large. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Alex McMullan, Vice President CTO here at Pure Storage, to discuss. Alex, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Thanks, Shawn. Hello, everyone. I'm Alex McMullan, CTO International. I have the privilege of working with the best engineers in the company, as well as with some of our cutting-edge customers. So looking forward to the discussion today.
All right, well, let's jump in. Last year, we saw the first semblances of this. An AI image, completely fabricated, briefly crashed stock prices. Today, with the release of Sora 2, that same image takes 5 seconds to generate and costs less than a cup of coffee. But here's what most people are missing. It's not a content creation story. You see, Sora 2 is turning a text prompt into a photorealistic video in seconds. And you don't just get a content tool, you also create a ton of data. Now we're seeing more and more companies jumping on this bandwagon, looking at the potential of Sora 2, but also taking rich media and making it from a rare commodity to infinite. Ultimately, rich media is now read-write for everyone. Everyone's now got this capability. And while it's thrilling for creators, it's absolutely terrifying for trust. So let's jump in, Alex. I mean, I don't know if you've had time to play around with this tool. I don't know if you've seen some of the videos out there, whether it's someone suffering a shark attack or whether it's a particular building falling over or whether it's, I don't know, someone driving some crazy car. What do you think? How's this changing the landscape of content creation?
Well, I think there's a number of different ways that we should look at this, Shawn, in terms of how it plays out. As you say, there's the trust, there's the security side, there's the ethics side, and of course, the privacy side of all of these things. As it comes to all of these, I think it's worth stepping back and understanding we as humans work, as you've said, we are a brilliant image processing machine already. We have an amazing thing up here somewhere that turns images upside down, that interpolates for blind spots, that copes with loss of vision. But the problem with that is we're completely dependent on it. Our eyesight, our vision is the sense we trust most. And that's where we become most vulnerable here. So when we're talking about content creation, I'd split that into probably 3 things, I think, overall, in terms of, do we use this as a way of less creative people making more creative things? Is it a way of accelerating technology or helping people learn better? Or is it a way of creating more credible scams, better fraud, if that's the right way of describing it, better fraud maybe? But also then, how do you take that into the world of regulation? Because when you look at that landscape, I'd say we're pretty much at the stage now of walking in front of the car with a flag saying danger, car coming. And that's how I feel we stand in this current landscape. So lots to talk about in this show today. Can't wait to get started.
You know, you mentioned something really interesting there. You talked about what we're seeing with our own eyes. It almost reminds me of that statement, are my eyes deceiving me? And I think about human society, right, being several 100,000 years old, depending on what you consider the first state of man. We haven't evolved that much. Our brains have evolved, but not nearly to the scale of where AI has come. And so are we really at that, are my eyes deceiving me moment? Are we there today?
I think we've had pretty good introductory exposure in terms of some of the deep fakes we've been shown, but we're also seeing the less appealing side of humanity coming out here in terms of body swapping, in terms of fraud, which is a shame because we want to focus on the way in which this amazing technology can do things for our society that we desperately need. And that's the challenge and the focus of how do you have enough control, enough regulation. AI can't be open loop. there has to be a way of the output coming back into the input and at least improving or making it no worse. So it's how do we not stifle the creatives who want to make an AI movie or an AI picture or an AI poem, it doesn't really matter. But how do we'll come back to this, I think, later in the show anyway. But for me, the key thing here is what was that model trained on? And that's where things start to get interesting.
Well, so you talked a little bit about people and personas and this sort of image likeness. And so, two of the first folks to jump on this bandwagon, Mark Cuban, Sam Altman, have both said, hey, the world's your oyster. Go create videos with us in it. And, I think that's kind of interesting. But at the end of the day, if you can remix a video, then fans can remix it. Platforms redistribute it. It becomes viral. You can think of this from a company standpoint. CEOs saying certain things, CTOs saying certain things, recordings of meetings that did or didn't ever happen. I guess there's a whole bunch of liability flags here, and you talked about ethics and integrity. But if someone claims a deepfake version of your video destroyed their reputation, are you liable? And here's the harder question. Every prompt is now data. That data lives forever. It's searchable, it's auditable, it's potentially discoverable in litigation. How do you kind of protect your custody of data and all of your executive protection that goes with it? Like, this just seems like Pandora's box has been completely shot open without any real controls in place to make sure it's used responsibly.
Yeah, so that's a kind of a doom-laden way of looking at it for sure, Shawn. I guess the tricky one here is, as you say, Sam had to actually walk back some of that commitment in terms of he blocked about Sora 2 and then the rights of image holders, which was something I think that came to him later in life. People who wanted to opt out of being in Sora 2 or have their rights not shown. We saw the issue with Martin Luther King and his family asking for further generation of his images to be banned. That comes on to another thing, I guess. We're all fanfics of some description of Star Wars, Star Trek. Do we think it's right to bring back people who have passed? Should we be bringing back dead actors in terms of Carrie Fisher, Peter Cushing, for want of a better description, coming back to the Martin Luther King thing? Is it ethical to bring them back when they've gone on that thing? Showing reruns, I think, is fine, but digitally simulating someone who is no longer there to protect their own rights, that's again coming back to the training and or ethics of using that data for privacy perspective as well. So lots of things to play on that one.
But the monetization is potentially so high. I mean, you mentioned Carrie Fisher. I could pull on the Star Wars, Star Trek piece, Elvis Presley, the Beatles. I mean, the monetization of actually doing this in a realistic sense almost essentially restarts the money machine at today's rate of revenue, which is much higher than any of these previous stars ever earned. It almost feels like the estates, it's going to be almost too much to resist. Agree?
Yes, but that's when you choose your friends and family wisely as well. The flip side of that is, if they're monetizing, are they like the up-and-coming band who only gets 1% of the record deal? Because right now, if the estate of, let's pick one, Carrie Fisher, for instance here, what is the beneficial value for them in terms of being involved in that and allowing Carrie's rights to be used in a number of different ways that maybe she would not approved of? She was quite feisty by all accounts. So I'm guessing not so much in some of those scenarios. But if there's a wider benefit and the right people benefit, that's where I think that's fine. But it has to be the right people, not just those who have scraped the web.
Yeah, my lord, you got me thinking about so many things here. It almost feels like we should all reopen our wills and decide what we want to be done with our likeness after our death, which is something
it's going to come.
Didn't think of. But kind of flipping to a more positive sign of this, what does it do for companies? I mean, if you think of just the processing and the marketing potential here, let's just talk a little bit about the positive, right? Storyboards to drafts to variants in hours, not weeks. I mean, A/B testing that can be done on the fly. Dubbing voices, changing languages, lip syncing, sound effects. I mean, do you think this is going to be as big a boon to the enterprise and the advertising space as today it is to kind of these, I don't know, funny pet projects we're seeing?
So right now I kind of feel like Ludd wrecking all the sewing machines and the steam-based weavers back in the other century, because You've heard quite clearly from OpenAI, from Anthropic, from Amazon, even from Ford, I think they've all said the same thing. AI is going to change the way that everybody works, but it's also going to remove completely some types of jobs. And that's a different conversation. And many of us are parents looking at our children going, well, you're going to university to study the law or engineering or some other kind of skill. Is it going to be relevant in 5 years? And what all these leaders are saying is probably not, at least not in the way you'd understand it. So the way that companies are looking at this technology, I think, is twofold in terms of cost management. But I don't get the same sense that many of those companies are looking as an investment for innovation or for advancement. Yeah, sure, there's some flip side examples of that in terms of some of the computer vision folks. Those are looking at material science or even indeed computer vision for medical purposes. But a lot of folks are looking at AI for chatbot, for customer management, for lowering their operational cost and thus lowering the size of their workforce. That's a difficult message in the way in which our industry is changing so quickly.
But do you think the viral aspect of what eyeballs, which essentially is what everybody's out there buying and looking for, do you think this presents a new avenue for building incredibly compelling content? And do you think we're just on the verge of seeing a move from really expensive studio production to essentially sort of two-fueled production and kind of the new, shiny red toy for grabbing eyeballs becomes this video generation at a scale we've never seen before?
I think it certainly has that potential. The unanswered question is, what is the quality of that output? Everybody is kind of that pejorative, dismissive, oh, it's all AI slop. And there's going to be some of that. It happened with Kindle books and self-publishing for sure. But there are also a lot of very creative, very talented people that don't have the right access to resources today. But with this kind of tooling, whether it's free or somewhat free or slightly free, I think that's fine, at least to get people up and running. Again, it comes back to when you or I choose to enter some text into a prompt to have, hamsters playing on a piano. That's actually a thing, by the way. If you want to generate that, okay, what does it actually do for the planet? What does it do for you? And in the way in which that revenue is generated and then distributed, is it the content creator that profits, or is it the hyperscaler, or is it the neo cloud, or is it a combination of a whole hardware vendors? And clearly we have a shoe in that particular closet already, but it has to be the right people that benefit. That's what history teaches us.
Okay, so so if we get to this point where all this content is created, I loved how you brought AI slop into there because we are going through that right now. By the way, no different than the TV slop and the radio slop and the Twitter slop that we had in the past. So this is a natural reaction.
Internet of slop, Shawn, a new one.
The internet of slop. But we've now also seen this concept of, okay, we have to protect our content. So OpenAI has brought these visible watermarks. We've talked about the C2PA content credentials that are embedded, which is essentially a cryptographic nutrition label for media, who made it, with what changed. YouTube, TikTok, Meta have also put synthetic content labels and watermarks on their content. But here's the problem. As quickly as these content protection platforms emerge, we see applications that are there in place to take them away and essentially strip the credentials. It reminds me a little bit like in the days of, what was it? Napster, when we moved to DDR, DRR, digital rights management, DRM, on our media. I don't know. I mean, this deep fake problem and companies essentially trying to protect their content with digital watermarks. Where do we go from here? I mean, you're obviously out in the EU. You see a lot of regulation that comes to bear. How do you think we take control of at least informing audiences of what has been created artificially and what is actually legitimate?
So I think what we're going to see is two waves. There'll be the initial wave of the early adopters, whether you want to call them the thought leaders or not is a TBC. But the challenge we're seeing here is then what happens afterward. Is there going to be a wave of DMCA takedowns? If I've created an AI video, but it was trained on Star Trek from 1965, you've already seen the issue with subtitles appearing in Sora videos because of the YouTube sources they were trained on had subtitles, and the subtitles can't be removed. Coming back to your hard question, humanity as a race has been incredibly creative at bypassing and circumventing security since the days of the first coin was forged. And the first coin was then forged by somebody else who didn't own it. We've come all the way through to Napster or DVD region coding or any of the other things in between times. We're always going to bypass and find a way. That's the nature of it. We are so creative. There has to be protection in law. And as we talked about earlier in the show, the place we are right now is very much walking in front of the car with the flag saying, there's a car coming. That's how our AI legislation is building. We don't know at this point what we have to legislate for. We're finding image creation, image management. We're finding, as you said, creative forgery of people in a Zoom call saying, yes, I approve this transaction. That's going to get better and better. But right now, we don't know what we're legislating for. And that's part of the challenge. EU has put its regulation in place as a overarching structure, which is essentially don't do bad things. But that's with the acceptance and the acknowledgement that we don't really know what the problem will be in 2 years' time.
Sounds a lot like the Hippocratic Oath, right? Above all, do no harm.
Yes.
Maybe we just need to revert back to Hippocrates. Look, if we think about what's going on, you talked a lot about government regulation. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that speaks more words than anything else is a big fine. And so do you think there will be the fine heard around the world, something incredibly litigious, something incredibly painful that's going to force organizations to take this seriously? Or do you think, hey, we're going to let this thing run as long as we can and hope we're not the first one that gets caught?
There will be litigation, particularly from the US side of things, which has historically been very litigious in terms of its digital assets, DMCA being that with the Recording Industry Association of America, for example. Those are challenges which have historical facts. What's going to get litigated is not necessarily the content that was created, but you trained your AI model on my Star Trek 1965 episode. Therefore, you owe me 98% of the revenue from the thing you created. It's the ownership of the data. We're seeing reaction to that already in the same way we did with open source, where some of the image asset companies, the iStocks, the Shutterstocks of the world, are actually creating a category of image which is indemnifying users from being sued by content creators if they can show that there is some of my content or IP in this particular image you showed. So it's the same as remember the old, we won't get sued by that other company who should be remaining unmentioned as they deserve to be in terms of Unix source code and open source code being used in the Unix kernel. So those kind of things are a natural evolution, but we're still such in the early days, Shawn.
Well, it's funny, right? Because you talk about patent trolls have existed forever, trademark trolls. And I think AI will be helping those trolls to actually see where their material's being used or where it may have been used. I mean, you and I grew up in the age of music where everybody was accused of copying at one point or another because they used the same 4 chords and the same progression with a slightly different beat. But I think AI is going to make it much easier for us to now see where did some of this information come from? Is there a close enough likeness compare? Can I go and look at metadata? Can I go and look at individual aspects of this content and find enough evidence to support that whatever revenue came off of that is actually my revenue? So more to come. I want to use your CTO point of view for a moment. So let's kind of round out this episode with a real scenario. So let's imagine, Alex, that you just became the interim CTO at a mid-market financial services firm. The board's heard about Sora 2, sees it as an incredible opportunity to go after essentially extending their market, looking at omni-channel, multi-channel. They want your personalized investment recommendations, but they're terrified of deepfakes. So you're an average-sized company. You see this as the next big thing in marketing and advertising. What's your play? How are you advising your board and those around you?
So I guess the first thing I'd advise them is to hire more lawyers. That would be the first stage in that particular part of the journey. Clearly, as with any video generation, whether it's generative or any other kind of ML capability, I'd want to understand what the output of this is going to be used for. What's my business benefit? And then going from there, I want to understand what it's being trained on, whether that's an open source data set, whether that's something the company has curated itself, if it's our own training videos or internal how-tos, then great. The key things to come out of that are something which is demonstrably clean in terms of the provenance of the data set that came there, but also to make sure that we update it. Because the thing people don't talk about enough, I think, is once data goes into a model, whether it's video, whether it's audio, text, doesn't really matter. It's really hard to get it out of there again or weed out every little influence that it's had in the generation of your, I mean, what are we at now? 500 billion parameters for some of the OpenAI and ChatGPT models. That's frightening in terms of how do you do that? So how do you retrain with one piece of documentation that was wrong or one advice video that was wrong? So change, retraining, but also having people getting comfortable with using the technology, but using the right piece of technology, not just something they've downloaded from the internet. We all know how that goes.
Yeah, I love the dynamic nature of what you just covered, because theoretically we've talked about retraining in the concept of a piece of data or a piece of research, but what if the likeness laws change for a particular individual or a particular piece of media that was used in your training catalog? Can you re-rag and still keep your model intact? But does your model deteriorate if you remove enough of that your entire business model collapses? Look, today we've covered just the basic crack of this. I don't think we know exactly where this is going, other than the concept of, are my eyes deceiving me, and what is actually true. I'd like to pose it for you that maybe if I didn't see it with my own eyes, I'm not entirely sure whether it happened. Reminds me of if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there to hear it, does it actually make a noise? For now, anyways, at least I know what I'm looking at in front of my eyes, at least in real life, is likely real. But I'm not sure that doesn't change either. Any closing thoughts for our audience?
So I guess the first thing I'd say is there's a guy called Heisenberg on the line. He wants to talk to you about that whole uncertainty thing. So TBC on that one. What we've learned in the last half hour.
I think
and we're going to have to edit that bit out. Come on now. That wasn't bad. That was pretty good. So,
no, I like.
And 3, what we've learned in the last 30 minutes, we're standing at the opening of a brand new dawn. There is some fantastic technology being created, built every day by some brilliant people. It's up to us, both as a species, but also as a technology industry, to guide that in the right way. There's always going to be problems. There's always going to be doomers. There's always going to be ways of saying yes, but the well, actually people. But what a great time to be alive.
I love your perspective, right? I mean, every time we've looked at these inflection points, there's always been naysayers. I mean, we joked on a prior episode about calculators and how folks thought, oh God, these things could never possibly work. They must be inaccurate. They're going to change the world. They're going to change jobs. We saw the same thing with computers, with the internet, with cloud. I think we're agreeing that this concept of video creation and what is today Sora 2 is a new inflection point for content creation. The difference here is most companies saw cloud computing coming. They had 5 or 10 years to plan for it. We're now seeing Sora 2 content live in weeks, if not days. And ultimately, the good news is you're listening and you guys are on top of what's going on. And we do think there are a lot of very positive aspects that can come for this. But at the same time, we think that for all companies, it is worth looking at the rights of your assets, the rights of your people, the creation of your content, the security of that content, and putting yourself in the best position to prepare for the future. Thanks for helping us break this down, Alex. For those folks out there that want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to find you online?
Sadly, today it's LinkedIn, Shawn. With the death of Twitter as was, it's the easiest way now. So look forward to seeing you all out there. Remember, everybody, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
All right. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. What a great way to end the episode. Thank you for breaking it down. Please, folks, for those of you listening along, please make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode of Beyond the IT Headlines. And if you're looking for some more data, tech, and IT news, please check out our new site, thedatawire.com, and we'll see you all next time.